You know, it's albums and artists like this that really give me hope for the future of prog, and it really goes to show that progressive rock isn't dead. So let's dive into it.
By standing in line today, you secure a place among the saints. Go.
Hellfire by Black Midi. So Black Midi is kind of an avant-garde jazz fusion rock band, very young too. This is their third release and they are pumping out albums like hotcakes. Their first album came out in 2019 with Shilgan. I cannot for the life of me pronounce that first debut album of theirs. And they really did kind of take the rock music by storm by infusing a lot of the more jazzy, jazz fusion, very like avant-garde stylings of music within a rock style, kind of like what Primus was doing in the early to mid 90s, but going more into the extreme and flirting a lot with extreme music and metal. And they really blew me away last year with Cavalcade. Now, I will admit, upon the first couple of listens, I wasn't as excited about the music that I was hearing. It was a challenge to get into, but as I've been diving into the soundscapes and the meat and potatoes of the album, I have warmed up quite considerably to it. It's still not my favorite, but I'm loving what these boys are playing with. Like, I'm loving what they're doing in terms of the musical landscape and rock in general, recontextualizing it for a 2020 audience. So Hellfire came out this year, and man, this one exceeded all the expectations that I had for this band. And it was interesting because I had kind of mixed expectations because, you know, I loved their first album. I was a little lukewarm on their second album. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And I didn't touch any of the promotional tracks along the way. I went in completely blind. What I got is a little bit less on the jazz fusion and a lot more on like a big band sound. Like, I'm getting a lot of flavors of like maybe a jazz of like the 1920s, 1930s approach where a big band was utilized quite often, because we have a lot of tracks that have this really big sound, this really big orchestration of music, but coupled with a lot more somber moments. And that was really what I loved about Cavalcade, is like the smaller, more intimate moments. And so we have a lot more of those here, specifically in the second track of Sugar Tutsu, and being a little bit more subdued and allowing the lead singer to inflect a lot of different inflections, I guess, within his vocal works. And that was another really big highlight for me. I love how the lead singer is able to really morph his voice into different characteristics. I can see a lot of people not necessarily appreciating and liking this, having like almost these overly large characteristics and even caricatures found on here with a lot of different accents being utilized, and you know, it kind of takes you out of the song. But for me, it provides a bigger context for the track being at large. Like, I almost have this ringmaster coming through and like showing different vignettes and different orchestrations of sounds. We also have this on the 8th track of Dangerous Liaisons, where again, very somber, very light and airy in that case. They're not just concentrated on blowing down the doors with these big bombastic sounds. And even moments in different tracks, like the last track of 27 Questions, have moments of smaller entities on there. And the track of Welcome to Hell have these smaller moments on it. It's just not blow down the doors, crazy, like balls to the wall intensity. There's a lot of these more somber and more like retrospective and thought-provoking moments. Now, that being said, there's still a lot of moments on here that have that balls to the wall insanity. Eat Man Eat is just the insane explosion of music and sounds that I really love and crave. We have a lot more of those like jazz avant-garde, very tight, very punchy. Same with The Race is About to Begin, where It's got this punch, this track, and I love how it's like the three notes. It's like dun 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 dun. It's like so almost grating at times, and it's so menacing. And the rhythm section of Eat Man Eat almost has like this calypso, this Caribbean aspect of it. Like it's very interesting to be paired with in this. There are moments on the 27 Questions, the final track on here, that are just explosive and just like grabs you by the shoulders and shakes you. Again, I gotta go back to more of those somber and quieter moments because, as I mentioned, this album has a lot more of those moments on it. The second last track of The Defense has like just beautiful orchestration of more heavenly moments on it that really does kind of solidify a little bit more of the whimsical aspect of the band. And if we want a very whimsical aspect of it, the title track of Hellfire has this very whimsical, very showman-y, very like The Greatest Show on Earth, very circusy aspect of it. But again, it's very whimsical. It's very like, I don't know, like don't take this too seriously. Now, I haven't talked about the fifth track of Still because that is my favorite track on this album. And even with their last two albums, there's always something that just makes me stop and be like, holy geez, what are they doing with music that's so brilliant and so magnificent? And on this one, it's Still. And I just love how they're utilizing more of like a slide guitar to infuse a little bit more of like folk music in this. It almost has like a country flavor on it. So they're definitely not afraid to bend genres. You know, they're a genre bender for sure in like trying different things and seeing what works. It almost has like this Steve Howe guitar inflections that we would find for Going for the One. And it's so soothing and it fits so well within the runtime. You know, and that's not necessarily something that I thought that Black Midi would be able to present very, very well. Like if you had told me that one of the biggest tracks on this album, I would say, was soothing, was angelic, was more like country flavor, I would have said, what on earth are you talking about? Are we talking about the same band, you know, Black Midi? But it does really stand stand on its own and being its own thing while still fitting very, very well within this album. And I think it's because they're able to play with all these different genres while still making it feel very unified. Yeah, I've been loving this album. I've been really, really digging it. This whole past weekend, I've been listening to nothing else. I'm loving the different flavors that we found on here. It is still very concentrated. It is still very punchy. I can see a lot of fans from Black Midi not appreciating this one right off the get-go because it is a little bit more somber than their last couple of releases. It's not quite as immediately punchy. There's a lot more somber moments on this, but I think it's a better gateway for fans that are a little bit more hesitant to a more aggressive tone that Black Midi likes to play with. I think this album is a lot more whimsical. It plays with that big band style of jazz that I really, really do appreciate and really love. And it provides a glorious statement of music from start to finish. Like, this is a solid album from start to finish. And I love the halftime little interlude that we have that kind of provides a breather before, like, between Still and the race is about to begin. This is a perfect album to own on like a record. And so, yeah. Let's just move on to the rating for this album. Hellfire by Black Midi is one that I absolutely love with my whole heart. This album really has shifted the needle for me in terms of how I approach Black Midi. They were just like a band to keep my eyes out for, to, you know, keep my finger on the pulse, check in with them every once in a while, to a band that I am more invested in. Like, I am excited for a new release from them, and it really has put more into context for their previous releases. So yeah, and in my mind, I think this is their strongest album. I can 100% see a lot of their fans not feeling that same way, and I can see a lot of their fans not being as excited about this album, but man, I love this album. So yeah, that's what I've got for Hellfire from Black Midi. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought about this, please let me know by commenting down below. I know that, you know, some people might be a little bit more hesitant on Black Midi, but I think this is a really good gateway, especially if you're into a lot of music that's experimental, that's avant-garde, that doesn't take itself 100% seriously, but is still very complex, very talented musicians writing very, very tight music. I think you're really going to dig this one, and I highly recommend that you check it out. So that's what I've got for Hellfire. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.